slate of top drama, sport, comedy, movies. Available, as is the way these days on TV's desktops, mobiles. According to TVNZ's Market Insights, male viewers are actively seeking more distinctive content. And as the only male viewer I can immediately survey, Dr. Edwards, is this true of you?
Oh, you can watch swags and swags of television programs now. Stacks of them, really. And our son is just setting up the whole thing for me to be able to have Netflix and all that sort of stuff now, which we've never had in the past. So, I don't know. I don't think we need more television channels.
Life will never be the same.
Well, do you know about this?
What? I know about Netflix.
You know about Netflix? Yes.
Yeah, she didn't know about your son setting it up.
I thank God for Netflix, because without Sky and without Wi-Fi on my holiday, Netflix kept me going, kept me entertained.
Well, he's going to set it up for us, and then hopefully we will also be entertained. Incidentally, since you just mentioned Sky, have you noticed that Live Pause has now gone from Sky?
No, it isn't. I used it last night.
Did you?
Live
I did.
Live pause. Live pause is when you're watching a live program and you can actually pause the live program.
Gotcha.
Nope.
Must be something wrong with our machine.
Phone ring.
Now, speaking of Market Insights, the name Nielsen, as you'll know, is big in the realm of ratings, and it's getting more probing and finding out what ratings are. And the Nielsen social content ratings now will measure conversation during a show. In other words, what you're all talking about in the dining room. They'll factor in which TV shows are getting the biggest buzz on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And with the demise of 3 News and the arrival of Hubs, as we heard about yesterday, what do you think of this development?
It's inevitable. I'm surprised it's taken so long. It is simply the application of technology to the ratings measurement industry.
Is it an accurate application? I mean,
only as accurate as Nielsen ever was, when they used to have people who had little books and wrote down every quarter of an hour what they were watching. It's probably more accurate because it's actually real time and it's taking into account real things that are happening and real comments, rather than somebody who you never knew when people were writing it down whether they sat down on Wednesday and thought, oh my gosh, I didn't write down what I watched last night, and suddenly filled in the book, 24 hours later.
But there's an enormous number of people who will talk about Mike Hosking, whose audience is large, and similarly enormous number of people who talk about Paul Henry, whose audience isn't as large. And there are TV shows that rate their socks off even though no one's talking about them. So to what extent can you rely on the chatter and the buzz of social media, do you reckon?
I think it is a measurement of what people are watching, and, the fact that, for example, there will be some programs that will provoke a lot of comment, even though there may not be many people watching them because of their content, because it'll be controversial. But of course, this is all part of the grand picture, because not only will they be measuring what people are talking about, they'll be measuring who those people are, where they live, what their demographic is, what they're reading, what they're eating. So it's actually part of putting together the whole story.
So that's a fairly major invasion of your privacy, really, if you think about it. Brian, what's going on there?
It is happening all the time, and you can't do anything about it except not have a cell phone.
The gap between what women and men are paid. I'm going to slip this in the country's 29 public service departments has been revealed for the first time, and we aren't allotting much time to this, and there have been thorough discussions earlier, but it is interesting. In Defence and at the Crown Law Office, the pay gap is 39%. Men are also in a lot more at the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, at the State Services Commission, 27% more than women. You would 26% at the Ministry of Education. You would expect a gap at Defence, wouldn't you, because of its traditions and hierarchies?
Yes,
but does the Ministry of Ed figure surprise you? As someone who media trains teachers...
This whole thing surprised me.
Did it?
Yes, because I was amazed. You hear about the gender gap in pay, but the numbers are big. We're talking about women earning 39% less than men or whatever. These are big figures in here. Or men are earning 24% more in a particular job than women doing exactly the same job. So I think this is a horrifying scenario that's been painted by this material, research.
I think what these figures are reflecting is seniority. So, for example, in the Ministry of Education, I know from working with them over a period of time, there would be a vast majority of their employees would be women. And probably the men who are there will be more likely to be in the senior jobs, whether that's because women have taken time out to have children, or they're choosing to do less responsible jobs because they want flexibility, or they want to be able to, leave at 3 o'clock and pick up the kids. But it will not simply be a reflection of the numbers, it'll be a reflection of the seniority, which is a function of many things.
But something is still up with that equation, isn't there? Because there are a lot of older women teachers, just as there are older male teachers, and yet they're not earning, presumably. Oh, well, these are departments, but I mean to go into the schools.
Yeah, no, I think departments, when you look at departments, you'll find that in the management roles, you will find the men are more senior, and that still exists.
And largely attributed by you to absences along the way for the women.
Yep, or choosing to do different jobs. I mean, look, we have a lot of women who are now very influential in business and at senior levels of the public service, but will we ever get to parity? And only if you ever get to parity, I think, will that really translate down into financial results.
One of the most interesting things for me in this material was that most of the institutions we're talking about were primarily Pākehā-dominated institutions. But at the other end of the scale, this research says, men at the Ministry of Māori Development were paid just 1% more than women on staff, while the gaps at the Departments of Corrections and Conservation and the Ministry for Pacific Peoples were at least, were all less than 5%. So there's something strange going on there, isn't there? That in these Pākehā departments, if you like, you have this huge gap. But in these Pacific Island and Māori departments, you don't.
You don't.
Yeah.
The only ministry where women are paid more than men is the Ministry for Women. And last year, women were paid on average 37% more than men there.
Which means that the senior women there, the senior people in that ministry, are women.
At the Ministry of Women, should women be paid more than men, or should they be?
No, but they're not.
Should they not be keen to show the chauvinist how it's done?
No, because what they've done is they've got in their management, they've got primarily women.
No, I understand.
And that is reflected in the figures.
Yeah.
Well, then the issue is, why do so few women get to the top in these other departments?
Well, a lot of them do. I mean, we don't know because you've got to analyse the figures to the nth degree. But there are an awful lot of very senior women in public service management and governance now.
Michelle Berg, we aren't hearing the music, but trust me, the panel is ending, and have a lovely weekend, everybody. John Campbell's Checkpoint following, and Michelle Berg, Brian Edwards, thank you very much.
Magnesium for your legs.
Thank you.
Right.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ National. We're on the radio, screening live on Freeview Channel 50 and streaming live on the RNZ website. However you're doing so, thank you for joining us. Tonight, deported from Australia, adrift in New Zealand. How is life for the Christmas Island detainees sent back here? A student loan of 40 grand became a debt of 130 grand and then got a man arrested. He joins us. A police officer's use of excessive force against a 15-year-old, and the existing flag and its challenger go head-to-head in 250 locations, including the Auckland Harbour Bridge. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. A pest fly has been found in the South Auckland suburb of Manurewa, just weeks after officials finally eradicated another invasive species. The Ministry for Primary Industries says a single tow fly was found in a trap yesterday afternoon. Kate Newton reports.
The tow fly from Asia is less damaging than the Queensland fruit fly, which was found in Auckland last year and prompted months of effort to make sure it didn't become established. However, the ministry says the species is still a threat to New Zealand's horticultural industry. Officials have established a 1.5 kilometre exclusion zone around the site where the fly was found, close to Manurewa High School. Pumpkins, zucchinis, cucumbers, beans, capsicums, passion fruit and melons can be taken into the zone but not out of it. The ministry says the tow fly is a tropical species and is therefore very unlikely to be able to establish a population here. In Auckland, Kate Newton.
A former Christmas Island detainee says he's applied for 50 jobs since he's been deported back to New Zealand and is having a tough time just surviving. Paina Clark moved to Australia when he was 18 and served 7 years in prison for assault and domestic violence. Mr Clark spent 3 months on Christmas Island before being deported to New Zealand at the end of last year. He says he's been honest with potential employers, but as soon as people understand he's one of the deportees, they don't want to know about him. Paina Clark says he's getting a sickness benefit of about $310 a week, but after paying $230 for accommodation at a boarding house, he's left with very little money, all of which he spends on food. He says thanks to a Māori Party MP, he's going to start work as a builder's labourer next week. Inland Revenue says it tried to reach a Cook Islands math teacher several times before arresting him at Auckland Airport for failing to make student loan repayments. Ngā Toku Toru Puna appeared in the Manukau District Court this morning. He's being allowed to return to the Cooks after paying $5,000 to the department. Mr Puna says his loan, which was originally at $40,000, is now closer to $130,000 because of interest. He says he heard nothing from the IRD since his last contact with them in 2010 and had no idea he would be arrested. However, the IRD's collections manager for student loans, Stuart Duff, says that's not correct.
From our side, we did actually make contact with the customer through the various channels of email, phone and letters to the customer, and as we say, the arrest at border was the last resort.
Stuart Duff of Inland Revenue. There are about 111,000 borrowers overseas, with approximately 70% of them defaulting on their loans. The police in India have arrested 6 Sri Lankan refugees for conspiring to illegally sail to New Zealand. The 6 men from Velankani in southern India were caught by the Tamil Nadu State Police Q branch, which monitors activities of banned organisations. The men from 2 refugee camps have been remanded to a prison in the state capital of Chennai. The Times of India reports they told the authorities under interrogation they planned to sail a boat more than 11,000 kilometres to New Zealand. Each of the men paid nearly $16,000 to a people smuggler. Several boatloads of refugees sailing to New Zealand have been intercepted, including 65 from Sri Lanka and Bangladesh in Western Australia last year and 66 off eastern Indonesia in 2013. A 15-year-old who was lifted off the ground by his neck and pinned against a wall by a Taupo police officer feared he was going to die. The Independent Police Conduct Authority has found the officer used excessive force on the boy after he was taken to the Taupo police station and refused to give his address. In its investigation, the authority heard another officer who had witnessed the event later saw the boy crying and breathing very heavily. The boy told the authority he couldn't speak as he was being choked and thought he would die. The police say they welcomed the decision and have praised the second officer for reporting the incident. They say they're yet to decide what discipline, if any, the offending officer faces. In sport, the Pakistan all-rounder Shahid Afridi has called on his bowlers to lift their game in tonight's third and deciding 2020 international against New Zealand in Wellington. The tourists won their opening game but were completely outplayed in Game 2 in Hamilton as the Black Caps cruised to a 10-wicket victory. Afridi says it was obvious their bowlers should have done better.
We will make some plan, especially the bowlers, where we're gonna ball to the batsman. Line and length and ball according to the plan is very important, and I think we missed that thing. But I must give credit to New Zealanders; they batted well.
Shahid Afridi. It's an important game for both sides tonight, as it's their last before the T20 World Cup in India in March. All Black Kieran Reid says he had no hesitation in retaining the Crusaders' captaincy. Sam Whitelock will captain the Crusaders for the first 3 weeks of the Super Rugby competition, as Reid's contract allows him to take off some extra time. Reid will also captain the All Blacks this year. The 30-year-old says having the first 3 weeks off is beneficial.
A real refresh, I think. Had a great break, ready to get back into training, but I think, mentally, for me, it's great to be able to help out with the team and know you've got maybe a couple of extra games off and then you can come back in and be really focused on playing well.
Kieran Reid. And the New Zealand women's under-17 footballers have secured their spot in the final of the Oceania Championships after thrashing Fiji 11-0 in Rarotonga. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the story of Nina Simone, as told by her daughter. Country life runs with the salmon at the mouth of the mighty Waimakariri. Dave Raish brings us the Eurosport, which, like a lot of sport these days, is in a bit of a fix. And we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the face because mine's just perfect for the radio. Join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
That's not true at all, Brian. Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, scattered afternoon and evening showers. For the remainder of the North Island, mainly fine but cloudy periods from Horowhenua to Wellington. Isolated afternoon showers mainly about the ranges north of Taihape. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with high cloud. A few spots of rain in Canterbury, mainly tomorrow. Buller and Westland, occasional rain, heavy at times south of the glaciers. Fiordland, heavy rain and thunderstorms. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy, scattered rain, heavier at times near the south coast and Stewart Island. And the Chatham Islands, low cloud, likely lowering to fog at night. It's almost 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. We begin tonight with the men deported from Australia after their visas were revoked on character grounds. They were sent to the detention centre on Christmas Island first of all and then sent home. Home is a relative term for these men. The men deported from Christmas Island and still held there in some cases pending their deportation have almost all spent their adult lives in Australia. Some of them moved there as children. Life in New Zealand, having suddenly been deposited here with no job, little money, a criminal history and no sense of connection to any community here, is proving tough for many of them. One man told me today he had no work, he already owed money, his power had been cut off and he was stealing toilet paper from a local public toilet. Another man has spoken to us of feeling suicidal. Their stories are consistently pretty similar: dislocation, inadequate support, joblessness despite repeatedly applying for jobs, and a desperately uncertain future. Having been discarded by Australia, New Zealand appears to be struggling to find a place for them. One man, Paina Clark, describes his life as a former detainee since he arrived in New Zealand in November.
Pretty hard, trying to get a job, trying to move on with my life, you know.
How many jobs have you applied for, roughly?
I've applied for well over 50 jobs since I've been in Auckland.
And what do people say to you when you apply for a job?
They ring me or send an email and I tell them my circumstances. I tell them I'm honest, you know, like I've been deported, I'm on parole, and they just shut me down. They don't want to know about it.
So the moment people understand that you're one of the 501s, one of the detainees back in New Zealand, you stop hearing from them?
Yeah, exactly.
So what are you surviving on?
I'm surviving on $80 a week to buy food.
That's after your accommodation?
After I pay $230 a week to stay in the room.
$230 to stay in a room in a boarding lodge or something?
Yeah, in a lodge, yes.
So you're getting $310 roughly in a sickness benefit, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
So $230 goes for the room, $80 a week goes for everything else?
Yeah. Yep.
So how do you spend your days? What do you do?
Me, I spend my days, well, I train a bit, or I go down to my local park or run. Most of the time I'm looking for a job. I do that first thing in the morning, look for jobs on the internet. And then most of the time I just kick it at home and just relax and try and figure out what I'm going to do next.
Your dad is dead. Where's your mum?
My mother's still in Australia.
Where's your children?
My children are still in Australia.
Do you feel like an Australian or a New Zealander?
I feel more of an Australian than I do of a New Zealander.
How many of the 501s who have been deported back to New Zealand are making a go of it that you're aware of? How many of them are making successful lives in New Zealand?
I only know of one at the moment. It's a good friend of mine who's working for Amnesty International. With the rest are in my position. We're all trying to get a job. We're all trying to move on, but it's not that easy.
Do you think that people will return to crime?
Yeah, it's inevitable that people are going to turn to crime. You know, if we don't get the help.
Who is helping you? Who do you hear from?
Well, at the moment, only person that's helping me really, or keeping in contact with me, is my parole officer.
Have you heard from PARS?
PARS helped us when we first got back. Yeah, they did a brilliant job. You know, they helped us with wins. They helped us get a birth certificate.
So they helped get you onto a benefit?
Yeah.
And they help you get the documentation to do that?
Yeah.
Have you heard from them subsequently?
No, they just put us in the house and I've tried to ring up for help for certain things and I don't get called back. But they did help us when we first arrived.
And what's your parole officer doing?
My parole officer, he's just ringing me. He's just asking me if I'm all right, if I'm fine, you know, and which is a good thing because that's support.
Are you all right?
At the moment, no, not really, because I suffer from a lot of mental issues, mental health problems, you know.
So how tough is life for you in New Zealand?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough as because I don't know anything about New Zealand. I'm lost here. But every day I try and stay positive and try and move on. You know? I try to deal with it, but I can't. Like, I'm strong, but there's only so much I can take as a man, I suppose.
Is anyone helping you find a job?
I have been offered a job. Thanks to Marama Fox, yeah. She gave me one of her contacts and they're willing to start me on Monday.
Doing what?
Builder's labourer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have to get to that job. Where's that job?
That job is in Manukau City.
And you're in...
I'm in Mount Roskill.
Right. So how much money does it cost each way to get...
Well, I worked it out yesterday when I went to the job interview. It's going to cost me about $22 a day to get to and from work, to work and back home.
And at the moment you're surviving on $80 a week.
$80 a week.
Which is meant to cover everything.
Which is meant to cover everything. So this week I've had to save my $80 and not buy food and use that for to get to work next week.
Would you have a job if it wasn't for Marama Fox?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I don't like to ask for help, but it got to the point where I just messaged her one day and asked her for help. I said I really need a job, so yeah, she's helped me out big time.
Do you feel the Australian government dumped you here and the New Zealand government doesn't want to know about you?
Yeah, exactly right.
Paina Clark, he's one of the detainees who was at Christmas Island deported back to New Zealand. We have spoken to a number over the past few weeks and those stories are remarkably similar. A group called People at Risk Solutions Incorporated, PARS, was given $100,000 by corrections to help people like Paina. Rachel Natai is the operations manager for PARS and she joins us now. Rachel, thank you for joining us. You heard Paina say early on in that interview that you were very helpful, that you helped him with documentation, that you got him onto a benefit, that you looked after him when he first returned. But since then, there is an increasing sense that these men are adrift. Is that how you see it?
Without having to focus on an individual, each individual case presents its own problems. Our role in the Deportee grant is a rapid response navigation service, so we meet the initial rapid response need and then we can navigate to the experts. Because we're not experts in employment, we would navigate them to what it is that they need further assistance with.
And we consistently hear that, in fact, you were really helpful as a first point of contact when they returned. But after that, let's set aside the specific example of Paina and let's talk generally. After that, is enough happening to help these men, even if only for the fact that if we don't help them, they are, as Paina said, inevitably going to return to crime?
Yeah, it is a hard question to answer, John, because the communication can remain open as to where it is that they can be navigated to and assisted with it. Our organisation, as I say, is mostly navigational after the initial contact in regards to deportees. I know that probation are also assisting in regards to hooking them with job clubs and trying to help them through job clubs. Work and income provide assistance as well if you're on the job seeker support program to seek assistance with employers. So, it's a hard question to answer, quite honestly, John, because it's about where it is that we can navigate. So we do navigate to different places. The communication can remain open, and it's just about where we can get them in.
Okay, two quick questions. Other than the navigation, which you keep talking about, who else is working? So other than PARS, with your limited resources, who else is working with these men to try and make a material difference to get them back into New Zealand?
It would be other community groups that they've been connected with. Off the top of my head, Salvation Army are providing assistance.
Right. What government agencies are working with them?
Government agencies are work and income, probation, if they're on strength for them. They have the opportunity to work with them. And then revenue has been of assistance, and that's in regards to getting what they need in order to get the benefits.
So Rachel, there is no one directly overseeing their reintegration, and in some cases their integration, because these people left New Zealand as children. In other words, this is piecemeal, haphazard, being left to agencies like yours, and there is no one really overseeing this in a concerted and singular kind of way.
I wouldn't agree with that. So I believe that the Department of Corrections are providing some sort of oversight and reintegration if they come back under the Act and they are under the wing. So I wouldn't totally agree that there is no one in the government department that's seeing some sort of oversight. And organisations that work with those government departments do their best to help enhance that.
You got how much? How much money did you get from the government? You got a grant of how much? $100,000?
Mm-hmm.
Was that anywhere near enough in order for you to do meaningful work? These men are spread far and wide from Northland down to Invercargill. Is that anywhere near enough for you to make a difference?
Oh, it helps with what we were trying to cover without the resourcing. And that's a matter that we would need to discuss with the department as to what we need to realistically look at and manage the amount of deportees that are coming back to New Zealand from Australia. So it was a grant that was applied because organisations such as ourselves weren't able to support and resource the continuing influx. So 100,000 was a start, and yes, it is a matter of us needing to discuss further as to whether it is going to continue to be enough. And we know with it covering from Auckland way down to the bottom of the South Island, it needs to be revisited.
Rachel Ngātai, the Operations Manager for PASS. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachel. We really appreciate it. 20 minutes past 5 on Checkpoint. Coming up, New Zealand's existing flag and the potential replacement flag. Of course, there's a referendum on that in March, flying side by side in 250 sites throughout the country. Find out what you think about it. And later in the program, the story of a young man suffering from an incurable degenerative disease. He and his 4 friends are travelling around the world with him on the trip of a lifetime, and they have just arrived in New Zealand. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Your feedback on detainees. Are they getting enough support? And what happens if they're not? You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And don't forget, you can watch us online, rnz.co.nz/Checkpoint. That will take you to a good quality live stream, we hope. We're also hoping that Freeview Channel 50 is working, although we're getting a little bit of feedback that it's not quite doing the job tonight. A Cook Islands maths teacher says he has been treated unfairly after being arrested for failing to pay his student loan. Ngā Kotoru Puna ran up a $40,000 student loan 20 years ago whilst earning a Bachelor of Arts degree at Auckland University. The loan has now spiralled to $130,000. It's the first time Inland Revenue has used its power to detain someone with unpaid student debt. The nephew of the Cook Islands Prime Minister was in New Zealand for an education conference and was returning to the Cook Islands on Monday when he was pulled aside at the airport.
I went to the custom lady and she looked at me, looked into the camera, and then she told me to take a seat. But I had an emergency passport anyways, because I sort of lost mine before I came, paid $500, to come over. So I thought it was just my emergency passport, something wrong with it. So sat there, ate my KFC. I've had a couple of pieces on my hand, so ate that. And then the police came and said I was under arrest for student loans. I'm saying, student loans? So I started looking around, thinking that it was a practical joke or something. I've seen, Facebook pranks and things like that. I'm thinking, is this a joke? And it wasn't. Tried to talk to the guy and explain, because he's saying basically I haven't been, I've been avoiding IRD, and I said, well, I made arrangements last time to put me on a holiday for 3 years because I'm under the threshold, so, you know, so
I need to clarify
I get
this.
a letter from them, then I get back to them to arrange my situation, how much I'm getting and things like that.
So you're a teacher in the Cook Islands, right?
Yes, that's right.
And what do you earn as a teacher in the Cook Islands?
Well, we start at 25,000.
Okay, so $25,000, no repayments required of your student loan, right?
Yeah, up to 30. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you acknowledge you have a student debt.
Yes.
When you finished studying, it was $40,000.
That's right.
What is it now?
It's almost 130,000, I think. Yeah, I got a sort of shocked because of the amount that is accumulated over the years. Finished my studies in 2003, and I've kept with IRD just to to make sure that they know my situation and things like that. But
so
they sent me a letter.
You believed you were under the threshold. What did the letter say? Did the letter say you didn't have to pay anything?
Yeah, that's right. And there was and now the Pacific Island, I think since 2010 or something like that, we're interest free.
So did you have any idea it had grown from 40,000 to 130,000?
No idea.
Okay.
I had no idea that it's gone that much.
Inland Revenue have said they tried repeatedly to persuade you to make some payments, that they've called you, they've emailed you. Did you receive those calls? Did you receive any formal notification from Inland Revenue that you were considered in default, as it were?
Yeah, no, I never got anything from them. That's what I told them. But just according to my lawyer, if I want to fight it, then I'd be spending more time here, and I didn't want to do that. So we had to make some kind of payment. That's what has happened yesterday and today.
Okay, so you've made a payment, which was how much?
I paid $5,000 for the obligations this year. So
and then you're going to have to go back and start servicing a $130,000 debt.
Yeah, well, yeah, something like that.
Do you have any idea, did anyone explain why it was you that got pulled aside like this?
No idea. But I've seen it on Facebook now. They're saying, Prime Minister's nephew. But I said that maybe because I'm I don't know.
Were you wealthy? Did you when you were going through university? Did you have lots of money?
No.
Okay.
No.
So the student loan got you through university. Did you work your way through university as well?
Yes, I was working because.
What sort of work?
Cater air, cleaning jobs. Yeah. I remember working at farmers at night, cleaning. Just to get some extra money just to live here, because I was. Yeah.
Okay, so you were taken into the police station and held for how long?
But from 8 o'clock to 3:30.
Processed through the process room?
Yeah.
Searched?
Yeah, searched, and then into that cold room with about 10 people, I think. And there was all sorts of people there. I'm not one to judge, but there was a lot of swearing. There was a lot of people just got arrested for being drunk and disorderly behavior and things like that. So I'm sitting there, just feeling like, do I belong to this group? Is there a group where is there room for people with just student loan? Or I just felt like I was a criminal. Like that was the It sort of hit me that I'm sitting with the criminal, so maybe I am a criminal.
Do you feel like a criminal?
No, I am not a criminal.
What are you going to do now?
Well, we've made some inroads when we had John Carter there as a New Zealand High Commissioner to recognise independent learners from the Cook Islands who come here, get there, upgrade themselves, and then go back to the Cook Islands, return to the Cook Islands.
But you still, all of that is a separate issue, really, because you have a debt of $125,000 or $130,000, which you have to pay. And as a teacher in the Cook Islands, you're earning what now? You started on $25,000. You're earning what now?
I'm 35 now. I'm the upper lot now.
Okay. So teaching is
so
not.
I'm the head of department.
And you're earning $35,000 a year.
National college. So yeah, I'm one of the highest paid teachers.
How are you possibly going to pay back a debt of $125,000, $130,000?
That's a good question. That's the $1 million question.
Nā tuku toru puna. He's not the only one facing action by the IRD. The New Zealand Union of Students Associations says it's worried harsh penalties will see student loan defaulters turned into permanent outcasts, simply staying offshore. It says the IRD isn't doing enough to give students abroad options to pay back their loans and will only scare them away. Mohammed Hassan reports.
The IRD says 2 out of every 3 graduates who go offshore don't pay their student loan back. But it says this week's arrest was a last resort and isn't a sign of things to come. The Union of Student Associations acting president, Laura Harris, says that still sends a chilling message.
It's very concerning. A lot of people are worried that they won't be able to come back into New Zealand if they have student loan debt. A lot of parents are worried that they won't be able to see their children again because they won't come back because they have student loan debt. So it has had a sort of knock-on effect.
Ms. Harris says she gets a lot of messages from students abroad struggling to make payments.
The overseas student loan repayment scheme is very difficult for a lot of students abroad. Because it is based on how large your loan is as opposed to your income, and there are quite high interest rates.
She says even though the IRD says the arrest was a last resort, it's not quite clear what that is.
We don't know how bad it has to be before we get arrested in the middle of an airport. Does it mean we don't pay for a year? Does it mean we move house and lose correspondence with IRD and then all of a sudden are arrested?
The IRD collections manager for student loans, Stuart Duff, says an arrest warrant was only issued for Ngā Takotoro Puna after the department tried to reach him repeatedly.
From our side, we did actually make contact with the customer through the various channels of email, phone and letters to the customer, and it's the most extreme cases. If a borrower persistently refuses to make a payment or contact with us, we will consider requesting an arrest warrant.
Jamie Coleman, a banker who lives in Australia, says she borrowed $8,000 for a tourism course 18 years ago. She says she tried to contact IRD several times and was told her details weren't in the system.
When I was 21, I went back to New Zealand for a visit, and I actually tried to contact the Inland Revenue to obviously let them know that, to sort out my student loan, to also move to change my address details because I needed to have it all sent to my mum's house. And they said, well, we don't have any record of that loan.
But nearly 2 decades later, last October, while visiting family in New Zealand, she was called by an IRD staff member who told her she now has to pay up.
I said, how much is it? And he said it was about up to $64,000. And he said, if you can make a payment of $34,000 by the 30th of March. And I said, well, there's no chance I can do that. I said, I still don't earn over $45,000 a year in Australia.
Ms. Coleman says she's trying to work out a more reasonable plan with IRD, but would now think twice about coming back to the country for fear she too might be arrested. The IRD Stuart Duff says it's not unheard of for someone's details to be lost for such a long time.
It is possible, and I think we just need to tie it back saying that the borrowers actually need to keep in contact with us with their current contact details as per their student loan contract when they take out the loan, that they should keep in contact with us at all times of their contact details.
He says by law, he's not able to comment on any specific case due to privacy issues. For Checkpoint, Mohammed Hassan.
Let's turn very quickly now to the saga of the home without $1 million view. Yes, the long-running dispute between neighbours in the upmarket Wellington suburb of Roseneath above Oriental Parade there over a 4-metre-high fence, you heard that correctly, that blocks the other's harbour view. The Environment Court today ordered David Wormsley to take down the fence that blocks up most of the views from an apartment on a slope above the property. Wellington City Council's planning manager, Warren Ulusele, was in court and joins us now via Skype video. Warren, welcome to the program. Lovely to have you with us. Can I just clarify where the council stood on this? Because I've seen it reported in various different ways. Did you ever regard this 4-metre-high fence, view-blocking fence, as acceptable or legitimate?
No, the council has been consistent throughout that this fence and the effects, which are quite severe, that arise from it, are unacceptable and inconsistent with what we expected under our district plan.
So who signed off on it?
Yeah, that's the misleading thing. It's never actually been signed off on. There was a question put to the council very early on: does it comply with the district plan? And the answer, in terms of the way that we were interpreting the plan at that time, was yes, it did. But we were at the same time very clear that it was still an unacceptable proposal, and that's why we took the court action that we did.
Okay, so what happens now?
So following the decision of the court today, assuming that it stands, and that will depend on whether an appeal is lodged, but let's assume that it doesn't, then within 1 month that structure has to be removed.
Okay, this has been pretty bitter between these two neighbours. Are you confident that the structure will be removed within a month, and what will you do if it hasn't been?
Oh, absolutely. It's an order of the court, and the council will assist in ensuring that that order is met. If not, then we're back into the court process. But I think we can be reasonably confident that this will be removed.
Warren Uluseli, who is Wellington City Council's planning manager. Thanks for joining us, Warren. Coming up, Winston Peters on seeing red over Carl Lockwood's blue and black flag alternative flying on the Auckland Harbour Bridge and elsewhere. Plus, we're in Vanuatu as the polling booths close in the country's extraordinary snap election. But first, here's Katrina with the headlines.
A former Christmas Island detainee says he has applied for more than 50 jobs since he was deported back to New Zealand in November and is having a tough time surviving. Paina Clark served 7 years in an Australian prison for assault and domestic violence and spent 3 months at the Christmas Island detention centre before being deported. He says as soon as people learn he's one of the deportees, they don't want to know about him. The pest fly tow has been found in South Auckland just weeks after officials eradicated another invasive species. The Ministry for Primary Industries says a single tow fly was found in a trap in Manurewa yesterday. The tow fly is less damaging than the Queensland fruit fly, which was found in Auckland last year, but is still considered a threat to New Zealand's horticultural industry. Inland Revenue says it tried to contact a Cook Islands maths teacher several times before arresting him for failing to make student loan repayments. Natoko Turupuna appeared in court this morning. He says he'd heard nothing since his last contact with the IRD in 2010, but Inland Revenue says it tried to reach Mr Puna and the arrest was a last resort. At least 9 people, including 6 policemen, have been killed by a bomb during a raid on a militant hideout in the Egyptian capital, Cairo. More than 13 others were injured. Millions of people along the east coast of the United States have been warned to prepare for what forecasters say is a potentially crippling winter storm, which could bring more than 60 centimetres of snow. A 15-year-old boy told the Independent Police Conduct Authority he feared he was going to die when a Taupo police officer lifted him off the ground by his neck and pinned him against a wall. The authority has found the officer used excessive force on the boy after he was taken to the Taupo police station. Those are the headlines. More news, sport and weather at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Just got a lovely email from a man called Keith Hammond, who was listening to Paina and his situation, like his attitude and willingness to work. We'll pay his first week's travel costs so he can make his paycheck. How do we go about doing this? We will put you in touch. Thank you so much. Really nice email. Nona, we're going to talk business with Nona Peltier. Looking ahead to the big event of next week, the first interest rate review of the year, right?
Yes, that's right. And it coincides actually with another review by the Federal Reserve. The United States Federal Reserve are going to come out with their notes the same day, so it's going to be another crazy day. That's next Thursday. Meanwhile, the markets are really looking forward to some kind of direction. So far, we've seen a lot of fear driving things around and very little hard data to help the market make decisions about which way things are going. So it's been a crazy time.
When there's no certainty, when there's no direction, markets tend to ease back on the volume a bit, right? So they've been going down. This is a really unfair question to ask you. I'm not going to name specific countries, and you're looking at me like, you terrible man. But in New Zealand, what sort of volume are we seeing traded? Are people just stepping back really and standing on the sidelines?
People are actually taking it carefully. I mean, right now, the New Zealand market is looking really good. I mean, we've got nothing but positive indicators. So, the market's going, wow, this is a great time to be in New Zealand. However, looking around the World Economic Forum is meeting right now in Switzerland, Davos, at the Swiss Alps. Very nice. 2,600 people, including, the biggest names in the world in terms of economic knowledge. And guess what? you know what the buzzword is there? It's okay to say, I don't know. They don't know. No one knows what's happening with the markets. That's great. So we're in very good company. However, really, as we move through January, we're really hoping to get some hard data, and the Reserve Bank will be looking for the same thing.
Yeah, it will be. Will the Reserve Bank be setting an agenda next week? Do you think we'll see an interest rate cut?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely, I don't. No,
Okay.
no. In fact, no one thinks that. Some are picking. 3 bank economists are picking a rate cut, 2 rate cuts through the rest of the year, but not before March. And so, no, I'm not really expecting very much. But at least the market will have some kind of sense of where things are going, because it's been quite chaotic for people. And you know, the bears and the bulls are running down the same street. It's all quite wild.
Looking bewildered at each other.
Bewildered for sure. And I'll give you the closing numbers.
Nona.
Yeah. The top 50 index, we closed up almost 0.7%. That's a rise of 41 points to 6,122. The New Zealand dollar also held on to its early gains, so it gained earlier today.
Yeah. On the back of what?
Oh, well, you know, strange news, actually. As a matter of fact, the European Central Bank came out and threw the market a bone, saying that they will review monetary policy in March. So, that kind of got people excited, drove the euro down. And anyways, and then there was this oil thing that happened, you know, oil prices. So there's, it's crazy anyways. So we're currently trading at 65.3 US cents and 93.2 Australian cents. And that's the markets for this week.
Nona, chatting with you this week has been one of the highlights of our first week.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and of course next week you're going to have our business editor, Mr. Giles Beckford.
So you're having week about, are you?
Yes.
Our formidable business team at Radio New Zealand.
Absolutely, it should be fun.
Well, I look forward to it. Well, we look forward to having you back, Nona.
All right.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you. Right. The flags are going up and going up. New Zealand's existing flag and the potential replacement flag flying side by side in 250 sites throughout the country. The stated intention is to help you choose which one you prefer for the referendum in March. Perhaps the most high-profile site is Auckland's Harbour Bridge. 160,000 cars cross that a day, and it can be widely seen from the city. But over the next few weeks, few people who get about in New Zealand won't see the two flags fluttering together like a fabric, Torval and Dean. Next, Winston Peters on why he regards flying the flag on Auckland Harbour Bridge as, quote, desperation. But first, the court of public opinion. Tom Furley asked people in Wynyard Quarter, which is an area down beneath the bridge, what they think of the two flags.
I think it's a good thing to see it flying. I think it's probably propaganda. I think it's been an odd process, but now that we've got this choice, let's see what it looks like. I'd like a debate. Why are we changing it? Just let's go back to that. Why are we changing this? What's this about for our country? And then we can decide what we want on our flag.
Like it or not, it's gone to a vote between the two flags, and that will be decided by the vote. So while we're in that process of choosing between the two, there should be definitely both of them up there to see and to compare and get a feel for both of them.
I'm a bit curious of it. It seems like something that's pressuring the people to vote for the flag, but it's certainly alongside the other flag, which does give it a bit of a balanced view.
Oh no, I think it's good. I think it's a great thing. It's an interesting time for the country, a little bit divisive in ways, but I think if they're going to do it properly, and it's a good thing, definitely.
I think it's a good idea. Yeah, we're from the UK, and we saw an article in the paper about the new flag the other day, and looked at the apartment this morning and saw there were two flags up there, and I think it's a good idea. It makes everyone aware of it.
Well, considering I didn't even know that both flags were up today, that's how interested I am in what flags the country is deciding to waste a lot of money on changing.
So that's downtown Auckland. Let's head to Northern Whananaki, where New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters is joining us by phone. Welcome to the program, Mr. Peters. What do you think of these flags flying? Well, this flag flying beside the existing flag on Auckland Harbour Bridge.
Well, you can't disagree with a number of the comments that you just run, but the fact is that no one was told that this was going to be part of the process. In fact, it is not statutorily an entitlement for them to do that. It's not legal. It's not the way we run public policy in this country. And if you were to ask them, do you like having your money spent without any notice whatsoever, without any budgetary provisions whatsoever, what sort of country do you think that would be? I think you'd find people change their mind pretty rapidly on that basis.
Do you oppose changing the flag per se?
No, I'm opposed to a process which was an absolute dog's breakfast from the start to the finish. You remember we had a panel who chose 40. They got down to 4. We passed a law for a referendum to go to the ford to have a run-off. And in the last moment, 11th hour, a new bill came into Parliament to entitle a fifth one, the so-called Red Peak design. Now, then we are told, well, we're going to run this flag around the country, despite the fact that just 6 years ago, the National Party, after 21 hui, at which less than 1,000 Maori turned up, decided to have a Maori flag flying on certain days, including Waitangi Day. So it comes Waitangi Day. Is the so-called new flag going to come down and the Maori flag go up? This is looking like a disorganised fetish circus.
The problem is it's our collective circus now, isn't it? I mean, this is a circus we're stuck with. There's no way out of the circus. And so there is a referendum in March. People are going to be required to choose between the existing flag or this new design. Isn't it best that they at least are able to compare and contrast?
Well, we've had millions and millions of dollars spent on that process in the runoff of the final five. In fact, the Choral magazine ran the four for a month before they realised there were five. That was a gross waste of money, as we all know. But, wasting money when the Prime Minister wants something without any constitutional propriety whatsoever. I mean, this is the guy that brought back knighthoods. Now, whether you like that or not, that's fair enough. But then he says he doesn't want the Union Jack. Well, he loves Hawaii. That's got a Union Jack on its state flag. And I kind of think that New Zealanders usually, because we're one of only 9 great democracies these last 157 years, only one of 9, we don't do things in this way. We're a serious country, and there should have been a proper, substantial, and fully informed debate about which they heard nothing when it comes to this flying the flag on 260 sites around the country.
Yeah, of course, the horse is bolted now. So what needs to happen? Do you want the flags to come down? What would you like to see happen? Seriously?
I'm asking Simon Bridges, who was the last guy who turned out on TV to explain himself, and the Prime Minister to tell us what the statutory authority is for spending money that way.
Okay, and who are you going to vote? Which flag are you going to vote for in the referendum?
Well, I'm voting for the country's history. As Ronald Reagan would say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Winston Peters from Whananaki on the phone. Thank you so much for joining New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters, 16 minutes to 6. What would you do if one of your friends was diagnosed with an incurable degenerative disease? Actually, just before I read this, we've got lots of feedback on the flag. I'm just going to whistle through that. Sam Smith, complete waste of money, process not democratic, no discussion of becoming a Republican. Worst of all, John Key wants all the credit for it. Miriam Taylor, looking forward to seeing the proposed flag for real. It's growing on me, as is the idea of it being our flag. Liz Allen, the Lockwood design does not represent all New Zealanders, and it isn't a great design either. Rita Smith, we're losing our biodiversity, which underpins our tourism industry faster than we can seize. And thanks to I don't think that's a flag email, sorry Rita, it's a good one, but it's not about the flags. It's really polarised, this issue. Incredible how different all the feedback is on the flag. What would you do if one of your friends was diagnosed with an incurable degenerative disease? For 4 friends of the Danish 22-year-old Jacob Rees-Nielsen, the idea was simple. Take him on a trip around the world. Jacob has a neurodegenerative disorder that leads to paralysis. Their journey has taken them from Thailand through Malaysia, Indonesia and Australia to their final stop, New Zealand. Nicola Keane caught up with them as they were heading for the South Island.
Meet Jacob. He's on a 2-wheel tour with a little help from his friends. What's been your favourite place so far on your travel?
Here.
Here in New Zealand? Yeah. Katrina Nielsen and 3 other friends have been travelling around the world with Jacob for nearly 5 months.
Even he's suffering from a child, Joseph, he's usually very happy and very brave and always ready for a good laugh and jumping out of a plane or whatever. So it's it's not stopping him from anything.
Including carrying Jacob in his wheelchair up Norway's highest mountain, meeting Komodo dragons in Indonesia, getting courtside with Caroline Wozniacki, and partying in Thailand.
So we went to this jungle party and there were so many people there, and Jacob actually got in the middle of the party and he crowd surfed everywhere. It's such a cool project, going around in wheelchair and see people's reaction and having a good time together and explore the world.
And now he's stepping it up a notch.
Then we reached New Zealand and the highlights here before we came here was like skydiving. So he jumped out of the plane 2 days ago.
There aren't many obstacles in Jacob's path.
The wheelchair Jacob has is like an off-road one, so we could go in the mountains and it can even float in water. So yeah, it helped us a big time having that along with us.
But there have been some challenges. Here's Jacob's friend, Jeppe Nielsen.
When you take a bath, you have to sit down, so sometimes we have to find a rubbish can so you can sit on. So we have some funny pictures of Jacob sitting in a different kind of things to have a bath.
A shower.
Yeah, so that's a challenge sometimes, but people are so kind to us. Yeah,
everybody's just offering us a hand if they see us. They say, can we help? Oh, that's very, very nice.
The five will spend their final weeks in the South Island, where they'll walk the Able Tasman track.
Yeah, it's really wonderful out there, so we want to show Jacob that.
For Checkpoint, Nicola Keane.
(13:06). We hope you enjoy your time in New Zealand, Jacob. Thanks, Nicola. Rita Smith, you did send feedback about the flag. We are losing our biodiversity, Rita says, which underpins our tourism industry faster than we can sneeze. And yet, thanks to the recent RMA changes, the silver fern isn't even a protected species anymore. Yet some people want it to be our symbol. Such shallow hypocrisy. And on the subject of the student loan, Marlene Williams, now as for the guy being arrested for failing to pay a student loan, why don't we just go ahead and arrest at the airport, say, Apple and friends for failing to pay their taxes, all that unpaid tax. Let's not forget the interest would be worth squillions. Apple, of course, who are having a real old stoush in Europe at the moment and could face a really substantial bill in the billions, say they do pay their taxes. What's really interesting about what Apple does is that they shift their costs around. This fascinating podcast about that available on the Radio New Zealand site. Okay. A memorial to the men who served as tunnellers during the First World War has been today unveiled and dedicated in Waihi. New Zealand sappers, mainly miners and engineers, served underground on the Western Front, tunnelling under enemy lines, blowing up trenches, trying to gain an unexpected advantages of the fighting reached such a terrible stalemate. Their deeds remained relatively unknown until recent years, but their contribution to the war effort was immense. Our Veterans Affairs reporter Andrew McRae was at the unveiling.
The 7.5 metre high metal sculpture is based on the letter T, the symbol for all tunnellers. Behind it lies a memorial wall. Of the 1,300 men who served in the New Zealand Tunnellers Company, about 60 were killed in action. The Vice Chief of Defence, Air Vice Marshal Kevin Short, paid tribute to the tunnellers.
The company was separated from the New Zealand division and worked in secrecy, so much so that for years the story of the tunnelling company was not widely known. Their work was dangerous, with the men working underground in the dark under conditions that most of us could not imagine or withstand.
The French ambassador to New Zealand, Florence Jean-Blanc-Riesler, says the efforts of the tunnellers during the war was remarkable.
The tunnels they created still exist today in France. They stand as a testament to the sacrifices made by these tunnellers. The tunnels and this memorial are both symbols of our common memories.
Descendants of the tunnellers attended today's ceremony. 89-year-old Dick Martin's father, Bertrand Martin, served on and under the Western Front. He says the work was hard and dangerous.
They were just not tunnellers. They built roads, repaired roads and built bridges. And they were, the engineers, as it were.
Dick Martin says recognition for the tunnellers is long overdue.
The emphasis on Gallipoli, and fair enough, but I mean to say the tens of thousands more Australians and New Zealanders killed in France than there were in Gallipoli, and yet still that emphasis is still that way.
Tom Kiley's father Thomas served as a tunneller.
But we've never heard until recent years about the Tunnelling Corps and their activities, and it is very revealing. I'm delighted with this permanent note now of this wall.
The French town of Arras, where the tunnellers were mainly stationed, was represented today. Spokesperson Isabel Pilarowski says local people find it hard to understand why New Zealanders went to war far from home but are ever grateful.
The New Zealand Tunnelling Company, they were not fighting soldiers, they were tunnellers. So they took part in the preparation of Arras. They dug tunnels to welcome thousands of British soldiers, so they saved thousands of lives. So it was a way of contributing to the effort of war.
The commander of the New Zealand Expeditionary Force, Lieutenant General Sir Alexander Godley, said after the war that no unit of equal size did more towards the ultimate success of the Allied cause than tunnellers. That sacrifice can now be honoured here in Waihi. For Checkpoint, Andrew McRae.
Thanks, Andrew. 8 minutes to 6. A 15-year-old boy who was lifted off the ground by his neck and pinned against a wall by a police officer says he thought he was going to die. The Independent Police Conduct Authority has found the Taupo officer, who can't be named because he's also under police investigation, used excessive force on the boy. But as our reporter Max Toll found out, he is still employed. Max joins us now live from the Wellington newsroom. What happened, Max?
Yeah, look, an incredibly sad situation. One night in November 2014, 2 young boys were out in Taupo. A member of the public said they were acting suspiciously, so the police went and picked them up just to drive them home. They weren't doing anything wrong. First one got driven home. The second one, though, refused to give his address. So the police decided two officers decided to take him back to the station so they could find out where he lived. On the way to the station, there was a bit of a tussle when the boy was found with a pre-mixed can of alcohol. The boy was handcuffed, so became rather agitated. Once they got to the station, the boy then ran into an empty holding cell and sat down and refused to budge. Now, this is where there are several versions of events and things become a little different, a little shaded. The boy, he says that one of the officers came into the holding cell, picked him up by his neck, lifted him off the ground for about 15 seconds. He said he worried he would die. This is how serious it was. Now, the incident was witnessed by a second officer. That second officer told the authority that they too saw the boy lifted up by his neck by the offending officer, and saw the boy was crying, clearly very upset, and once put down, struggling to breathe. The officer himself, his version was that when he went over to the boy looked like he was going to spit at him, so he was merely pushing his chin away. The second officer reported the incident to... The second officer clearly thought that something was awry and reported it to their superior, and that's how it ended up with the IPCA. OK, what did the IPCA find, Max? Well, there was no CCTV camera footage. There was no camera in the holding cell, so they purely relied on the 3 sets of events, and they decided that the boy's version and the second officer's version of events were similar enough and credible enough to be believed. So they disregarded the officer himself, his version of events. They ruled that the officer clearly used excessive force. The boy was only resisting verbally, he wasn't being violent, and the officer shouldn't have picked him up by his neck or choked him, and the boy didn't deserve what happened to him. OK, very quickly, Max, what's happened to the officer? He's still in the job? Yes, he hasn't been charged. The police are investigating. They're conducting their own internal investigation. I did speak to the police. They said that he has taken voluntary leave for, in their words, unrelated reasons. But the police did put out a statement earlier today. They say they welcome the decision, and they also praised the second officer for having the bravery to report the incident to their superior. Max Toll, thanks, Max. Really appreciate it. 5 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. Let's go to Vanuatu. Voters have gone to the polls there. They close, I think, in just over half an hour. The country's snap election triggered after months of political instability. This has been a nutty old circus up there. In October last year, 15 MPs were convicted for corruption, with Parliament finally dissolved last month. 263 candidates are standing for the 52 seats available. RNZ international reporter Jamie Tahana is in Port Vila and joins us now. Jamie, are you there?
I am indeed, yes.
Nice to talk to you, Jamie. Are people turning out in big numbers to vote?
Depends on the polling station you go to and the electorate, it seems to be. Some there have been turnouts where people have been lining up right down the road, whereas others have only seen a couple of 100 people today. So it's a mixed bag, and they can't really compare it to 2012 or to the electoral, because the electoral roll's wrong. It's got about 200,000 people on it. I mean, there's a duplicate name people on the list and so forth, so I don't really know.
Jamie, can Can we just back up the truck a little bit? And can you remind us of the circumstances which saw MPs convicted, MPs pardoning themselves, the proverbial hitting the fan in such a profoundly eccentric fashion? What happened?
All right, so if we wind back to about a year ago, so Joe Natuman, who's now formerly an opposition MP, was Prime Minister. He was overthrown, and Moanaka Kases, he's the former Green Party leader, he offered these bribes to several other MPs to join his side, and he called them loans, and of course the vote of no confidence happened, which are a regular occurrence in Vanuatu, and so Sato Kilman and Moanaka Kases formed the government. Now, they forever maintained that the bribes were loans, but the court found they were bribes, and they wound up in jail. Well, that's the very short account of what happened over the past year. And then so that resulted in a political stalemate. They couldn't form a government of national unity with the opposition. So President Baldwin Lonsdale, about 6 weeks ago, just dissolved Parliament and called this election.
So what is the expectation there? Is there polling in Vanuatu? What are you expecting, Jamie?
They don't do polling, and pretty much every observer, every journalist, every politician even I've spoken to has been reluctant to go to the crystal ball. No one knows what's going to happen. Nothing like this has happened before. And, I mean, for some constituencies, say Santo, the big island of Vanuatu, every one of the incumbent MPs is in jail now, so that's going to look very different come the next Parliament.
Jamie, can I come in there? In the context of that thoroughly eccentric situation, is the election itself regarded as sound? In other words, there are observers there, but the election itself is regarded as reliable?
Yeah, it is. So there's observers from Pacific Island Forum, Commonwealth, there's dozens of observers around here. The Electoral Commission has admittedly, they've admitted this themselves, struggled to put on the election in a month with 10 staff and whatever limited funding they have. Their office is pretty much a shed out the back of the Internal Affairs Department. And so they have struggled. As I mentioned, the electoral rolls have problems. There have been cases of people trying to double vote, but they're very isolated instances. I mean, the worst cases we've heard of is about 12 people in one area weren't on the electoral roll and they got a bit angry. And there's another case on Malakula, one of the other islands out here, where reportedly, this hasn't been verified yet, but apparently a polling station there was burnt down with some problems. But they're the only two incidences so far. So as far as elections and stuff in the Pacific go, it's pretty settled.
Jamie Tahana, thank you. Radio New Zealand's Jamie Tahana up in Port Vila, Vanuatu. Air New Zealand, by the way, is suspending flights to Vanuatu indefinitely because of worries about the condition of the runway up there. The airline says the runway has gradually been deteriorating. Cyclone Pam obviously didn't help it, and Air New Zealand is suspending flights before the situation becomes unsafe. There will be one more flight from Port Vila to Auckland on Sunday to bring back people who are visiting Vanuatu. We hope that includes Jamie. And breaking news, a Kiwi jailed in Myanmar for insulting Buddha has reportedly been arrested from prison. You'll remember this case. Philip Blackwood, 32, a dual New Zealand British citizen, was sent to prison for 2.5 years for posting a picture of Buddha wearing headphones in a bar he managed. So the report is he's out, an amnesty deal from Myanmar officials. It's 6 o'clock. Kia ora everyone, you're with Checkpoint with John Campbell on RNZ. John Campbell and a formidable team of producers and reporters here at National Radio. Thank you for joining us. You're listening on the radio, most of you, but we're screening live on Freeview Channel 50 and streaming live on the RNZ website. Coming up in the next half hour, why home is not so sweet for the Christmas Island detainees deported here. Māori Party co-leader Marama Fox is up next. What is likely to go down at Ratana? And why does it matter? And which New Zealand road has the dubious honour of being voted one of the world's most dangerous, infamous, I suspect. But first, here's the news with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. A former Christmas Island detainee says he's applied for 50 jobs since he's been deported back to New Zealand and is having a tough time just surviving. Paynor Clark moved to Australia when he was 18 and served 7 years in prison for assault and domestic violence. He spent 3 months on Christmas Island before being deported to New Zealand in November. He told Checkpoint with John Campbell, as soon as people know he's one of the deportees, they don't want to know about him. Paynor Clark says he's getting a sickness benefit of about $310 a week, but after paying $230 for accommodation at a boarding house, he's left with very little money, all of which he spends on food.
It's tough as, because I don't know anything about New Zealand. I'm lost here, but every day I try and stay positive and try and move on. I try to deal with it, but I can't. Like, I'm strong, but there's only so much more I can take as a man, I suppose.
Paynor Clark feels the Australian government dumped him in this country and the New Zealand government doesn't want anything to do with him. He says thanks to a Māori Party MP, he's going to start work as a builder's labourer next week. An organisation that helps prisoners when they're released says it may need extra funding to cope with the influx of detainees. The operations manager for PAS, Rachel Ngatai, told the programme the $100,000 the government gave her organisation to help those being sent back to New Zealand may no longer be enough. Ms Ngatai says that money was a good start, but PAS is now trying to help former detainees all over the country. She says the Corrections Department is providing some oversight for detainees arriving back here. The Union of Students Associations says it's worried harsh penalties will turn those with student loans into permanent refugees. This comes after a Cook Islands maths teacher was arrested at Auckland Airport for failing to make loan repayments. Mohammed Hassan reports.
The union says Inland Revenue isn't doing enough to give students abroad options to pay back their loans and will only scare them away. Its acting president, Laura Harris, says the arrest of Ngā Takotoro Puna this week is sending a chilling message.
It's very concerning. A lot of people are worried that they won't be able to come back into New Zealand if they have student loan debt. A lot of parents are worried that they won't be able to see their children again because they won't come back because they have student loan debt. So it has a sort of knock-on effect.
Laura Harris says even though the IRD says the arrest was a last resort, it's not quite clear what that is. The IRD collections manager for student loans, Stuart Duff, says Mr. Puna was arrested only after the department contacted him several times by phone and email. This is Mohammed Hassan.
The Ministry of Primary Industries says it's trying to establish how a tropical pest fly that could threaten the horticultural industry arrived in New Zealand. The tow fly has been found in the South Auckland suburb of Manurewa, just weeks after officials finally eradicated the invasive Queensland fruit fly. The ministry says a single fly was found in a trap yesterday afternoon. Pumpkins, zucchinis, cucumbers, beans, capsicums, passion fruit and melons can be taken into a 1.5 kilometre zone around the site where the fly was found, but not out of it. A senior official, Brendan Gould, says the ministry is unsure how the fly got here.
There's not a whole lot known about it, so it was a bit of a surprise for us that it turned up here. So a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment will be trying to find out that information, so the actual impact is a bit uncertain at this stage.
Brendan Gould says the fly is tropical, so very unlikely to establish a population in New Zealand. A dairy company owner has criticised the food industry over its silence on animal welfare issues. Joni Williams told a Food Futures conference last year's scandal over the treatment of bobby calves should never have been allowed to happen. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin was at the conference in New Plymouth.
Joni Williams, co-owner of the boutique Hawke's Bay dairy company Origin Earth, told the audience of about 150 industry representatives, politicians and development agency staff that every one of them had a responsibility to report the ill treatment of animals. She says tanker drivers, vets, meter readers and salespeople went onto farms every day, but instead it was left to people with a vendetta against the industry to break the story. Mrs. Williams said the New Zealand brand could not afford for livestock to be mistreated. This is Robin Martin.
Animal rights activists say Western tourists are helping to keep the black market dog meat trade alive in Southeast Asia. Dog is traditionally eaten by many people in Vietnam, China and South Korea. But animal rights groups say tour guides are now pushing Westerners to try dog meat as a cultural experience. They say the dogs are often stolen pets, which are crammed into tiny cages, strung up and boiled alive. According to activists, about 5 million dogs a year are eaten in Vietnam and 2.5 million in South Korea. An estimated 70% of the dogs eaten are pets stolen from communities or homes. To sport, the New Zealand batsman Ross Taylor is confident his experience will see him through in tonight's third and deciding 2020 international against Pakistan in Wellington. Taylor didn't play in the 16-run loss in Game 1 and wasn't required to bat in the 10-wicket victory in Game 2. Despite the lack of game time, Taylor isn't worried.
You just got to go out and sum up the situation as quick as possible and let your instinct take over. I think anytime you play 2020 and you overcomplicate things too much, there's been periods where you don't bat for a week or so in between test matches or one day. So, you would like to have had a bat, but that's what the nets are for, and hopefully can, as you said, the experience can take over.
Ross Taylor. The game gets underway in about an hour. New Zealand Football's Chief Executive Andy Martin and Board President Derek Shaw have met with one of the men who could become the most powerful figure in world football. Prince Ali bin Al Hussein of Jordan was in Auckland today to meet with NZF ahead of next month's FIFA presidential election. NZF voted for the Prince in last year's election, which he lost to the now suspended President Sepp Blatter, although NZF wouldn't confirm whether it'll recommit its vote to the Prince this time round. Meanwhile, the New Zealand women's under-17 footballers have secured their spot in the final of the Oceania Championships after thrashing Fiji 11-0 in Rarotonga. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, whatever happened to Burt Reynolds, fearless to the point of insanity on the set of Deliverance apparently, now in calmer waters. Indie musician Sufjan Stevens had an interesting childhood. His latest album is called Carrie and Lowell, about his damaged, doomed mother and his stepfather, who in many ways saved him. And Dr. Joanna Emini on how poetry can bridge the gap between doctor and patient. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland, scattered afternoon and evening showers. For the remainder of the North Island, mainly fine, but cloudy periods from Horowhenua to Wellington. Isolated afternoon showers, mainly about the ranges north of Taihape. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with high cloud. A few spots of rain in Canterbury, mainly tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, occasional rain, heavy at times south of the glaciers. Fiordland, heavy rain and thunderstorms. Otago and Southland, mostly cloudy, scattered rain, heavier at times near the south coast and Stewart Island. And the Chatham Islands, low cloud, likely lowering to fog at night. It's 6:08.
Thank you, Katrina. It's been really nice working with you this week.
It's been lovely working with you too, John.
Taking to the being on the screen stuff like a duck to water, you have.
Yeah, right, it's a bit terrifying, but there we go, I'll get used to it.
You've done a fantastic job. Yeah, we all think you're awesome. Where could she you being white? In fact, we'll just cut to the look at that. Applause in the control room. For people who are listening rather than watching, there was applause in the control room. 6:09 is the time we began Checkpoint this evening with the reality of life for former detainees in New Zealand. So these are people who have served their time, they've committed crimes in Australia, and no one is glossing over that. They served their time, but then their visas were revoked on character tests. Some of them are still in Christmas Island, some of them were sent to Christmas Island and then deported back to New Zealand, but many of them have spent much of their lives in Australia. Their adult lives, some of them went there as children, they're back in New Zealand, they are completely disconnected. And they are adrift and feeling increasingly desperate. One example, the man we interviewed this evening, Painter Clark, says he survives on $80 a week in New Zealand after he's paid his rent.
I just need to cover everything, so this week I've had to save my $80 and not buy food and use that to get to work next week.
Would you have a job if it wasn't for Marama Fox?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I don't like to ask for help, but it got to the point where I just messaged her one day and asked her for help. I said I really need a job, so yeah, she's helped me out big time.
Do you feel the Australian government dumped you here and the New Zealand government doesn't want to know about you?
Yeah, exactly right.
Māori Party co-leader Marama Fox worked with Painter Clark. You just heard him saying she's helped him get work. She joins us on the phone now. Kia ora, Marama. Welcome to the program. How bad is this situation? Because it strikes me that Peina is not alone. In fact, I've spoken to a growing number of detainees who are desperate. Some are feeling suicidal. Some are feeling like returning to crime. They're all feeling adrift. What needs to happen?
Look, all of these people, all of the detainees who've been returned to New Zealand need to be put in touch with real services, with real people who can find them work, who can connect them with communities, who can get them in touch with rugby league teams, with rugby teams. All of those types of things help them cement their place in the community. Meanwhile, they've got family back in Australia that they struggle to be in touch with, children who are reliant on them finding some work here. They've also got lawyers in Australia that they get no legal aid for. They don't get no legal help in New Zealand to continue to apply to appeal the deportation back to New Zealand. It is a struggle, and they are getting desperate, and we need to do more.
It's a hospital pass from the Australians, isn't it? And what is... I mean, people go to jail all the time and they are released from jail, but almost always they go back into their communities. These men, their communities are in Australia. And it does seem to me that there has not been a concerted and willful and coordinated effort to make sure that someone is looking out for them in New Zealand.
That's right. It's absolutely correct. The hospital pass from Australia is abhorrent in my mind. Now, some of these men had already been released and were serving parole conditions in the community, working full-time. Many of them say to me, I already have a job. If I was not in the detention centre, I would be full-time working and paying back to my community, looking after my family, paying for the mortgage on my home, and now they're here in New Zealand, can't get a job. They have that stigma over them of being a detainee, a deportee, and we hear that they're all rapists and criminals. That's not true. Some of them have violent crimes, but actually in the case of Arthur Toya worked 36 years in Australia, had no criminal convictions in Australia. He had an old conviction of theft from his 20s. He's now in his 60s, and he was denied re-entry into Australia, sent back to New Zealand when he was here for a family function, and now is stuck here, can't work, can't get his family can't leave their jobs in Australia and come back here. It is a hospital pass, and the New Zealand government have done some things, but certainly it's not enough. Whānau Ora have come to aid of Peina, but certainly in every community or every detainee, someone needs to be wrapped around them, or we will inherit the mess that Australia has passed back to us, and they may return to crime or whatever to try and just keep themselves above water.
Marama Fox, Māori Party co-leader, we really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much. Marama Fox, who helped Peina Clark get a job. But it does seem, and we'd love your feedback on this, as if the support for these men who are ours now, whether we wanted them or not, and whether they wanted to be here or not, is piecemeal and letting them slip through the cracks. It's depressing to talk to some of these men. There's one man I've been talking to who is at a very low ebb. What needs to be done? We'd love to hear from you. Right, let's go to our political editor, Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell, who is in Parliament. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
We're going to talk about Ratana Pa. It's the annual pilgrimage to Ratana Pa, just outside Whanganui this weekend. It's traditionally the kind of the beginning of the political year, the end of the silly season, the end of annual leave, and the leaders all turn up. Why? Why do they go?
Well, Ratana has actually long been a political entity. So way back to 1936, Tahu Pōtiki Wiremu Ratana, the prophet, went down to Wellington, or came to Wellington, and met with the then Prime Minister Michael Joseph Savage, and they formed a political alliance. And the following election, they won all the Māori seats. Now that alliance remains really strong. So for the 80 years since then, Labour has gone to Ratana Pa every year for the annual celebrations. And I think, well, not quite sure actually, I've been trying to find out today when Nationals started going, but because of that annual pilgrimage, it's become firmly etched in the political calendar. So it's like the first event of the year. And it's quite interesting because of course, because all the politicians go, the nation's media follow along,
Yes,
and
that's
there's
right.
become a bit of a flurry, and the church is actually, the leadership have been wanting over recent years that I've been going to try to rein that in a bit. So they've been trying to make it a shorter amount of time that the politics go on for, so they can try to have less of that palaver and more focus on what is actually on the 25th of January, the Prophet's birthday. So that's what they want the focus to be on, not on all the politics. So they're actually trying to this year get the government and the opposition parties to walk onto the par together. But I'm not sure how that'll wash. We'll find out on Sunday, because that will be quite something with John Key and Andrew Little walking onto the par together.
If we go back to that extraordinary clean sweep of the Māori seats, I think it was a clean sweep by New Zealand First. Prior to that, Ratana was tight for Labour, and yet it's always been a reasonably inclusive event. Everyone's been welcomed. There's been great hospitality there. This year, though, there is a sense that TPP protests may throw a cat amongst the pigeons. Is there a concern about tension?
Yeah, it's not exactly clear what will happen, but the church leadership has said that they've been told that some people do want to protest at the event. And it has always been a very peaceful, very colourful event, not a site for protest. So it could be quite different this year. The leadership is very firm, though. They're calling for calm. They don't want any protest. They don't want anything that's going to overshadow the events there, which again is around the Prophet's birthday. So I understand that actually some of the church membership will make their feelings known about the TPP as part of the formal speeches, but they don't want any protest on the sidelines. Now, anyone who is thinking about protesting, of course, will be well aware that because the politicians are there, the nation's media will also be there.
Absolutely.
So they'll be thinking that they'll get some kind of coverage. But the church is really, really putting the message out there to please, keep it really calm. And I guess the reason that there is protest is, of course, because the TPP is being signed in Auckland on February the 4th, the day before politicians go on to Waitangi. So feelings are running, very high in Te Ao Māori around the TPP and around the deal itself.
Chris Bramwell, good to talk to you, as it always is, Chris, our deputy political editor. Chris Bramwell, thanks, Chris. Australia's favourite foul-mouthed tennis star Leighton Hewitt has ended his career with a straight sets loss to David Ferrer at the Australian Open in Melbourne. Hewitt has had a tumultuous career, winning 2 Grand Slams, but only making the quarterfinals once in a major tournament since 2007. The 34-year-old gained a reputation for his on-court tandies and didn't disappoint, if that was the sort of nonsense you were after, at his final match in Melbourne. Our tennis correspondent, David Luddy, is in Melbourne. Hi, David. How did Leighton Hewitt go out?
Well, actually, he went out very well. And let's be honest, every single player who plays foul-mouthed somewhere, even if it's under their breath, it is a rare occasion indeed that they have a go at umpires and line judges. In fact, I remember once Serena Williams went to a line judge which was playing Kim Clijsters at the US Open and said, "I'm going to put this down your throat." And she got reported by the line judge and she was thrown out, which I thought was rather good. But Leighton Hewitt, he's always been a great fighter, the best pound-for-pound fighter on the tennis court, if you're going to equate that to a boxer. He's been highly respected by all the players because of his effort. He's given everything for Australia. He's proud to be an Australian, of course, and he likes to represent his country, which is a lot more than we can say about many other players who represent their countries. Some of them don't want to play. But Leighton Hewitt has been an icon in the sense that he always gives everything on a tennis court. And if he did throw out a few little words last night, hey, let's forget it. He came into the press conference last night. He had his 3 beautiful kids with him, and it was a nice send-off. Everyone had a glass of champagne. Let me tell you, I did not, because I did not partake. But he went off really well. He's still got one more match to play.
David, why didn't you partake?
That's it.
What are you not?
Why didn't I partake?
Yeah.
Because I was still working. I'm a professional journalist.
Right, yeah. Well, what are you saying? You saying that professional journalists don't drink?
Not while I'm working, no. One glass and I'm gone anyway.
Goodness gracious. Oh, Gail Woods, who's in charge of standards at Radio New Zealand, will be delighted and very proud of you, David. I'm sure you'll receive a commendation at some stage. Can we talk about Serena Williams and Novak Djokovic? They're both playing, are they? They are defending champs, both in action this evening, are they?
They are, and they're the undisputed world number ones. We're sitting here, it's not even the end of the first week, and I'm going to put my head on the scalpel.
You're sober. You're sober head on the block.
My sober head on the block, perfectly picked up by you. And I just can't see anyone really beating either of them.
Wow.
Serena Williams is three times she won the Grand Slams last year, trying to win her 22nd Grand Slam title. She's come through her first 2 matches reasonably comfortably. She's going to play Daria Kasatkina of Russia, who's world ranked 70, an 18-year-old who won the French junior championship last year. But I can't see Serena being affected. And, you know, it's all pointing towards this. Maria Sharapova on this heavy rain-affected day. Not a ball has been hit on the outside courts. It's still raining, but there are 3 courts that have roofs on. Sharapova came through, and it's going to be Serena Williams, you think, against Sharapova in the quarterfinals. Serena, you think, is going to win that because she's beaten Sharapova 17 straight times.
Wow.
I cannot see anyone beating Serena. And as for the men, Novak Djokovic, can't remember the last time he didn't reach a final. It's probably over a year now. And he's playing Andreas Seppi. Now, this time last year, Andreas Seppi knocked out Roger Federer in this particular round, but I can't see Djokovic losing today. He is in a masterful form. He is a league above everybody else, and he's going to win tonight.
He's a magnificent tennis player, isn't he? Thanks, David. Really nice to talk to you. Our tennis correspondent, David Luddy in Melbourne. It's incredible just how dominant Serena Williams and Djokovic are at the moment. 21 minutes, actually, it's just coming up to 22 minutes past 6. An Indonesian handicraft maker helps people with disabilities by teaching them skills and then exporting the products they make to overseas buyers. This is a lovely report in from Reuters.
Irma Suryati inspects the handiwork of one of the sewers in her craft shop. Suryati, like those who work here, is disabled. 3 years ago, she opened the Mutiara Handicraft Center to teach people how to sew after finding it difficult to get work herself. Suryati says she hopes people buy the crafts made here not out of pity, but because they're made well.
I am selling and marketing the mats, not out of pity, but more about the quality. We are professionals in the business, and we're up for competition with other companies. Thank God we've already entered the Australian market, and this year we will start expanding our business to Singapore.
Ke Australia, dan tahun 2016 ini kita sudah ekspansi sampai ke Singapura.
There are 20 people with disabilities working here, including Taufik Ismail and his wife, Jumiati. Ismail says the job helps him earn income and a sense of pride. Other than the financial benefit, I feel satisfied, he said. This isn't only about earning money, but also about work satisfaction. According to Indonesia's National Socioeconomic Survey in 2012, around 6 million of the country's 250 million population are living with disabilities, and many find it difficult to get a job.
Coming up in a shorter World Watch PM at 6:30, a frosty reaction from Russia to the report into the death of Alexander Litvinenko. Extraordinary state of affairs that. Basically, they've concluded Putin knew and or ordered it, and is Germany's tolerance for migrants under threat? Those stories and more on World Watch PM right here on RNZ National at 6:30. It's shorter on Friday nights because of focus on politics. That's a really good half hour from 6:30 till 7. A Queenstown stretch of road has been named the 3rd most dangerous in the world. International website dangerousroads.org has given the honours to Skippers Canyon Road, a 27-kilometre stretch of unsealed road flanked by a sheer cliff face with space for just one car at a time. It's so dangerous that your rental car insurance won't protect you if you drive on it. But long-time Queenstown tourist bus driver Graham Williams, who's driven up and down the road every day for the last 10 years, says the road isn't scary, but it is spectacular. Graham, are you on the phone from down there?
Certainly, John. Good evening.
Nice to talk to you. So, if you get it wrong, it's pretty disastrous, right, on that road?
Yes, it would pay not to get it wrong. It's a typical New Zealand backcountry road, and it's actually controlled by the Queenstown Lakes District Council, but it does have its breathtaking moments.
And how often do you meet people in situations where one of you has got to reverse in a most uncomfortable fashion for quite a way?
The commercial operators who go in there, they're all pretty good. They all use the road with great care and responsibility. Nobody travels fast on there. But yes, every now and again, as you're coming in or out, you'll meet a visitor or one of the local folk from the district, there's 4 or 5 people live up the Skippers Road, and one of them travels it every day.
Well, so why do you go back and forth? Have you got tourists with you?
I do. Yes, I work for Queenstown Heritage Tours, and we take in high-ace minivans, and we have 8, 9 people with us each time. We have 4 or 5 vans going in there every day.
And so not dangerous at all as far as you're concerned, Graham, as long as you're careful.
As long as you're careful.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. It's a beautiful part of the world, Skippers Canyon Road. 26 minutes past 6. Finally tonight, if you think moving house is a tough, stressful job, spare a thought for Jo Pilkington. Ms. Pilkington owns First Scene, New Zealand's largest prop and costume shop. She says the film and television industry in New Zealand is booming, and that meant that they needed more stock and a bigger space for their costumes. But the move was huge and not easy. Claire Easton-Farrelly was there with Jo Pilkington on moving day.
We've got about 400,000 items, and we've spent the last 3 days starting our amazing move. We estimate it's going to take 50 truckloads to move the business, and we've got 23 staff working on it. Come and have a look at the costumes. 80s and 90s, the era that taste forgot. Armour, medieval, seriously popular aisle. We've actually got 30 aisles here. We've got things like the 20s, the 40s, 50s, 70s, right through the ages. Then we have things like Halloween, Gatsby wear, Western, character, international, army, of course. Everybody loves to dress up in a uniform. We are sort of checking everything as we go. We're also checking for breakables, for wear and tear. And so some things aren't going to make the move with us. Some things are going to a new home. On the 28th of February, we're having a garage sale. It's an annual event, and it gets recycled and has another life, which we're all about. Today is really one big massive stock take. Welcome to the props department. We've got everything here from gargoyles through to Marilyn Monroe's, through to coffins, pirates, anything you can imagine. If you need a computer from the 1970s, if you need a fridge from the 1950s, we've got it. We've outgrown our last space, and so we really needed the 2,000 square metres we've taken on here. One of the reasons we've actually decided to move is that our industry is progressing and it's incredibly positive. So for the film, TV and the entertainment industry, in terms of events and people's personal celebrations, we're really moving forward. We're growing every year. Yeah, we're really excited.
Claire Easton-Farrelly. That brings us to the end of our first week of the new checkpoint. We've had wonderful feedback and support from people. We're still a work in progress, but we promise you engaging current affairs and news about subjects that matter with a bit of humanity and maybe a bit of fun. We really are delighted by how many people have got in touch. And one of the things that's been really fantastic is how many people are listening and watching the live stream overseas. What we thought we might do next week towards the end of the programs is get in touch with New Zealanders far and wide who are connecting to us and listening or watching us from all over the shop. So please just go through checkpoint at radionz.co.nz, email us checkpoint at radionz.co.nz, tell us where you are and we'll Skype you. We're now going to have a shot of the control room. He says in a thoroughly passive-aggressive fashion for people on radio. This is our team, some of our team of course. What makes Radio New Zealand so strong are the reporters throughout the country, the producers throughout the country, but that's the team running the shop in Auckland. Thank you everyone who has tuned in during the week, given us feedback, whatever it may be, encouragement, suggestions. One of them is don't lean forward because my sound is muffled, so I will stop doing that. It's lazy to lean forward anyway. And never put your elbows on the table, as my mother says. 10 seconds to go, but 5 seconds are taken up by the pips, and here they are. Oh no, there's no pips. It's only 6:30. What a bummer. Here's World Watch.
You're listening to RNZ National. It's 6:30. Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm Rowan Quinn. In tonight's shorter edition, Russia responds to accusations that Vladimir Putin's behind the death of a spy. And is Germany's tolerant attitudes to migrants changing? Those stories and more in World Watch PM. Russia has dismissed the findings of a British inquiry that says the President Vladimir Putin probably gave the go-ahead to poison a former spy. Alexander Litvinenko died in London 10 years ago after he was given polonium. The inquiry has blamed 2 Russian agents. Its findings are causing tension between Russia and Britain, as the ABC's Meredith Griffith reports.
The UK is seeking the extradition of the 2 Russian agents named as responsible for the death of Alexander Litvinenko, but at least one of them is not worried. Andrei Lugovoy is now a Russian MP and has dismissed the inquiry as a spectacle.
There was no public inquiry at all. It is actually just an open lie. It is a delusion towards which they are leading the whole global community and any person who is watching TV or reading the newspapers.
The inquiry's chairman, Judge Robert Owen, said the killing was probably approved by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Mr. Putin was before TV cameras in Moscow as the findings were made public, but he declined to comment on the matter. However, Russia's foreign ministry says Britain's handling of the case had clouded relations. A ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, dismissed the inquiry as a sham.
There was one goal, and it was clear from the very beginning: to vilify Russia, its officials and government. And with regards to this, I'd like to remind you that this softly spoken, peculiar form of investigation isn't and wasn't, despite its name, either clear or public for both the Russian side and British society.
The Kremlin has criticised the inquiry for relying on unpublicised information from the intelligence services. However, journalist and Russia expert Mary Dejevsky says Russia would have had access to all the papers if it had agreed to take part. She doesn't think the findings will affect British-Russian relations.
It's hard to see how British-Russia relations really could be clouded much more than they already are. I think relations between Britain and Russia have been almost worse than between Russia and almost any other country in Europe and even with the United States. Something tends always to go wrong with British-Russia relations. And if you look at the aftermath of Ukraine, then the British were the harshest in rhetorical terms. They were the ones that demanded sanctions.
However, Mary Dejevsky says the wording of the inquiry's findings gives the UK some wriggle room. Because it doesn't definitely blame the Russian state, the UK is not forced to take tough action.
In a way, it's not in either side's interest. It's not particularly in the British interests to go much beyond rhetoric, because at the moment, we and the rest of the Western alliance need Russia, both for the fulfilment of the Iran deal and for any possible peace settlement in Syria. So I think there are interests at the moment which are bigger than something, however dreadful, that happened 9 years ago.
The Prime Minister, David Cameron, appears to have acknowledged this. Responding to the inquiry's findings, he said Britain needs a relationship with Russia, but goes into it with clear eyes and a very cold heart.
Meredith Griffith reporting. In Germany, self-defence weapons are in high demand following wide-scale sexual attacks on New Year's Eve. And the revelation that migrants were behind several of the assaults could be changing attitudes to minorities. The BBC's Katja Adler reports on the shifting mood and speaks to the Secretary for the Interior Ministry, Emily Hayder.
Non-lethal gas pistols, mace and pepper spray are flying off the shelves here. Customers say they want them for self-defence.
A lot of women are coming to us and a lot of older people. I have 10, 15 sorts on pepper spray. We have electroshocker. We have some other items. Normally it's full here, but now you see it's empty. I have nothing now.
The shop manager here told us the New Year's Eve sexual assaults by migrants in the city of Cologne has changed everything.